Thank you for your attendance today. My name is Brian Greenspan. On Saturday, December 16th, 2017, the day after the shocking discovery of the murders of Barry and Honey Sherman, I was retained to advise the Sherman family as to the manner in which they might contribute to the investigation of their parents' double homicide. The family had been understandably outraged by the unfounded police statement on Friday evening, which they believed from the outset had jeopardized and indeed compromised the integrity of the investigation. At the outset of my remarks today, I wish to reaffirm the pledge and commitment made by the Sherman family and maintained throughout the investigation to support the Toronto Police Service in their efforts to seek justice for their parents and to pursue those responsible for these unspeakable crimes. The sole objective of ensuring that no stone be left unturned and the private resources which the Sherman family will continue to make available is the enhancement of the police investigation of their parents' murders and the advancement of the common goal of finding and prosecuting the perpetrators. When Barry and Honey Sherman were murdered more than 10 months ago, the only hope and expectation which the family had is what every grieving family of every victim of violent crime should expect: a professional and comprehensive investigation in order to seek justice and closure. While the lifestyle or the position which a victim has held in society should never have a bearing on either the public resources or the commitment which investigators have in solving a crime, it is also understood that investigations of this nature are complex and time-consuming. The Sherman family is acutely aware of the pressures and responsibilities placed on the Toronto Police Services, particularly in 2018. This year has seen unprecedented acts of violence in our community. It is understood by the family that the Toronto Police Service Homicide Squad has been heavily taxed. My mandate at the outset included assembling a distinguished group of homicide and forensic investigators with the commitment which we first expressed to the Toronto Police Service on Monday, December 18th, 2017, 4 days after the discovery of these crimes, and which we have reiterated on numerous subsequent occasions. Never to interfere or compromise the investigation, but rather to provide support during this challenging process. We have benefited from a team of distinguished investigators. 4 of this group join me today. Let me briefly introduce them. Tom Klatt, who organized our efforts, enjoyed a celebrated career with the Toronto Police Service, which spanned over 2 decades, and during which he spent 7 years in homicide, where he was involved in more than 70 murder investigations. He also served as a key member of the Intelligence Bureau in elite units investigating organized crime and international drug distribution. Mike Davis enjoyed a legendary 32-year career with the Toronto Police Service, and during his 17 years as a detective and detective sergeant in the Homicide Squad, was involved in more than 100 murder investigations. Of significance in our efforts, he has been qualified as an expert on the standard of police investigations and police practices, both in the Superior Court of Ontario and the British Columbia Supreme Court. Ray Zarb was a member of the Toronto Police Services for 33 years, and for over 14 years also served as a detective and detective sergeant, during which he was involved in excess of 60 homicide investigations and countless suspicious deaths. He was also a key participant in the Special Projects section, where he assisted in the investigation, extradition, and conviction of homicide suspects internationally. He also initiated the formation of the Cold Case Unit. Brian Dalrymple also joins us today. During his 28 years with the Forensic Identification Services of the Ontario Provincial Police, his expertise in fingerprint and footwear identification, body examination, computer enhancement, and forensic photography were utilized in numerous homicides and major projects targeting organized crime. He was a pioneer in the use of lasers to detect fingerprints, and as a result, the OPP became the first police agency in the world to be operational with this technology. Other key consultants upon whom we have relied include Dennis Bulligan, who served with the Toronto Police Service for 35 years and is a staff sergeant in charge of specialized operations with the Forensic Identification Services and is a detective sergeant in charge of operations for the Scenes of Crime section. Allan Benton was the coordinator and an instructor in the Provincial Scenes of Crime Officer Training Program. He was previously a forensic identification instructor at the Ontario Police College and a member of the Toronto Police Service for over 30 years. Dr. David Chasen, the former chief pathologist of Ontario, conducted the private autopsies of Barry and Honey Sherman on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. And Dr. Peter Collins, associate professor of forensic psychiatry at the University of Toronto, has extensive law enforcement experience in violent crime analysis and has served as a consultant with respect to the crime scene. Let me be perfectly clear. We have not come today to either reveal the scope or extent of those investigatory steps in which we have been involved, nor to suggest the direction which the investigation will now take. We will make no public disclosure of information which either we have acquired or which we believe is in the hands of the Toronto Police Service. We have also always understood the need to maintain the integrity of the police investigation and the potential concerns with respect to sharing information with parallel private investigators. We will do nothing to compromise the public or private efforts to bring those responsible to justice. Nevertheless, we have also persistently urged the Toronto Police Service and their counsel to consider the wealth of academic literature which supports the value of public-private partnerships in law enforcement and the advantages of utilizing private resources to advance complex investigations. We believe that there are procedures which can be established to protect the integrity of a police investigation in achieving our common goal, finding and prosecuting the perpetrators of these unspeakable crimes. Australian scholars have identified a number of key factors critical to the success of private-public partnerships, including mutual respect, information sharing based on high levels of trust and confidentiality, and a willingness to experiment and consider all ideas. It has never been our intention to alienate the Toronto Police Service or to conduct an audit of their performance. Our intention has been to provide additional resources and enhance the investigation. It remains the belief of the Sherman family, by working together, we will increase their chance of finding justice. The Sherman family has conducted itself with dignified restraint and has only responded when public comment, ostensibly based on police sources, was unfounded, factually incorrect, and led the initial investigation to what we believe to be the wrong direction. Their experiences during the course of the investigation have led the family to reluctantly conclude that they must publicly share their concerns. In moving forward after more than 10 months of silence and frustration, the Sherman family felt it appropriate for the public to understand why they believe that it is time for a new initiative. On December 15th, 2017, as you know, Barry and Honey Sherman were discovered in the basement of their home in Toronto. Toronto police attended the scene, and before any investigative or inquiries had taken place, they came to the conclusion and announced to the public that there was no sign of forced entry and that they were not currently seeking any suspects. That misguided, indeed unfounded conclusion left the wrong impression that this was a self-inflicted crime, either a suicide or murder-suicide. That comment set the wheels in motion and conveyed a false sense of security to the public and devastation to the Sherman family. Police are required by law to maintain a certain professional standard in their approach to investigations, but in this case, at this stage of the investigation, the manner in which the Toronto Police Service conducted itself fell well below that standard of how a reasonable officer in similar circumstances should have acted. The police failed to properly examine and assess the crime scene where Barry and Honey Sherman were located in the basement by the pool. They failed to recognize the suspicious and staged manner in which their bodies were situated, sitting next to each other with ligatures pulled up around their necks and wrapped around a railing, forcing them into an upright position. Barry Sherman's legs were outstretched, with one crossed over the other in a passive manner, wearing his undisturbed eyeglasses and his jacket pulled slightly behind his back, which would have prevented use of his arms. The observations at the scene, quite apart from the fact that no inquiries had yet been made with respect to security practices at the residence, could not and should not have led to the premature and wrong-minded conclusion announced that first night. This was not the standard by which the Toronto Police Service is expected to fulfill its public responsibility. David Chasen, the retired chief forensic pathologist of Ontario, conducted the second autopsy on Wednesday, December 20th, 2017. The 3 homicide investigators present at this press conference today attended at the autopsy and were provided access to photographs of the crime scene. At the conclusion of Dr. Chasen's post-mortem examinations of Barry and Honey Sherman, it became clear that they were both murdered, and the Toronto Police Service should not have drawn any conclusion which suggested self-inflicted injuries. We offered access to those conclusions, but it was not until January 24th, 2018, that the lead investigator from the Toronto Police Service met with Dr. Chasen. It is our understanding that this discussion impacted and contributed to the belated public announcement by the Toronto Police Service on January 26th, 2018, that Barry and Honey Sherman were the victims of a targeted double homicide. It should be noted that until that meeting, the Toronto Police Service had filed a sworn affidavit to obtain warrants to search, indicating that they were investigating the murder of Honey Sherman and not Barry Sherman, falling below the standard of how we believe a reasonable officer in like circumstances should have acted. While the Toronto Police Service held on to the Sherman family home for 6 weeks, best practices were not followed. For example, it would be typical in a murder investigation of this sort to have vacuumed the immediate area where the Shermans were found. The intruders might have left behind a small sample of hair or fabric. The Toronto Police Service failed to follow best practices and did not vacuum the area. When the crime scene was turned over to the Sherman family, our investigative team vacuumed at the outset of their examination, which unfortunately was now a contaminated crime scene. Furthermore, the Toronto Police Service did not follow best practices in their failure to conduct a thorough examination of the points of entry into the home. If this best practice had been followed, they would have located a point of entry to the home, which would have seriously undermined their misleading and irresponsible conclusion that there had been no forced entry. This oversight in failing to have comprehensively examined the locks fell well below the standard of what would be expected during a homicide investigation. One of the first steps in a murder investigation is to collect all fingerprints and potential DNA from the scene, and to compare those fingerprints and bodily fluids with those from everyone known to have been present at the scene at a time proximate to the crime. This collection of prints and fluids is conducted for the simple purpose of elimination. Whose fingerprints do we recognize? Whose might have been left behind by an intruder? We know that today, more than 10 months after the murders, this preliminary and simple task has not yet been completed. Aside from failing to complete this standard protocol of fingerprint elimination, the police also missed at least 25 palm or fingerprint impressions that were discovered by our private team at the scene once the house had been turned over to us after more than 6 weeks of police presence. Needless to say, the failure to follow simple procedures regarding print elimination again fell well below best practice standards, which should have been observed. For the family, the most perplexing and upsetting aspect of the investigation was the failure to recognize the obvious, that the bodies of Barry and Honey Sherman were staged post-mortem in a very deliberate manner. This entire process has caused needless additional pain and suffering to the Sherman family. As was stated earlier, the Sherman family understands the pressures and responsibilities that are placed upon the Toronto Police Service. Regrettably, it has become clear to them that despite the active pursuit of search warrants and exploring other investigative avenues, police resources have neither been properly managed nor effectively utilized. Therefore, as this new initiative, as an attempt to reignite an investigation, the Sherman family has asked me to announce the offer of a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the apprehension and prosecution of those responsible for the murders of Honey and Barry Sherman. A call center has been established to collect tips and information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It will be live monitored from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily and monitored by voice message overnight. The leads will be analyzed and vetted, and any meaningful information will be conveyed immediately to the Toronto Police Service. The toll-free number, North American Reward Line, is 1-833-668-0001. And the international number is 011-905-849-7373. Those lines have now been activated. In establishing both the reward process and the call center, we believe that the assessment of eligibility for reward and the contribution and value which information might be assessed should be evaluated in accordance with accepted international protocols and administered by an independent panel. We therefore also announce that the following three distinguished participants in the criminal justice system have agreed to assist us in this effort and serve as that panel. Matthew Turigian. Mr. Turigian was formerly Waterloo Region's Chief of Police, a past president of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, and a member of the Board of Directors of the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. He's a graduate of Wilfrid Laurier University and holds a master's degree from the University of Western Ontario. He was invested as an officer of the Order of Merit of Police Forces in 2012. From June 2014 until this past week, in October of 2018, he served as Ontario's Deputy Minister of Community Safety. His portfolio included the Ontario Provincial Police, Public Safety, including police education and training, as well as death investigations in Ontario. He is currently a distinguished fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and Global Policing at the University of Toronto. Dr. Peter Collins who I mentioned previously, assisted with respect to the staged nature of the Sherman homicides, is an associate professor of forensic psychiatry at the University of Toronto. Has for almost 20 years been a key consultant in law enforcement with violent crime and behavior analysis units of major police organizations both in Canada and the United States. He has worked with and instructed numerous criminal justice agencies, not only in North America, but in Europe, South Africa, Southwest Asia, South America, and Australia. Frank Addario, a distinguished colleague of mine, recognized as one of the leading criminal defense lawyers in Canada, and in 2016 was awarded the G. Arthur Martin Criminal Justice Medal for his contributions to criminal justice. He is a past president of the Criminal Lawyers Association of Ontario, a fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, and a vice president of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. In 2012, he was awarded the Diane Martin Medal for Social Justice through Law, recognizing a member of the Canadian legal community who has demonstrated a commitment to using the law as a means of achieving social justice. And finally, on behalf of the Sherman family, we would invite Chief Saunders of the Toronto Police Service to appoint a member of the force to join this panel in administering and assessing the eligibility for this reward. As I said at the outset of these remarks, the Sherman family is committed to ensuring that no stone be left unturned, and that whatever resources that may contribute are available to law enforcement in achieving our common goal. We'll now entertain questions for a brief period of time.
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Berman. I'm the Vice President of Global Corporate Communications for Apotex. I'm supporting Brian and the team in moderating the Q&A, and in doing so, I would ask that when you are called on to please direct your question to Brian, and he will either provide a response or direct it to a member of his team. I'd also ask, I see the hands going up, in the interest of managing and getting to as many questions as we can, is that you limit yourself to one question and one follow-up, and we'll take questions now. Yes.
Mark Douglas, 680 News. Are you folks considering any civil action against the Toronto Police Service?
No such action is being considered at this time, nor do we anticipate at any time.
Yes, over there.
John Lancaster, CBC. Much to what the answer to the question, I'm sure your team is well aware, a real estate agent who was inside that home the day the bodies were found has spoken out and says it was at least a week or two before police reached out to him. Given he was in that home at potentially a very key moment, is that another troubling aspect of this investigation as far as your team is concerned?
I don't consider it troubling, because I will assume at this stage that Toronto Police have spoken with him and did speak with him at the time. We spoke with him. There was a language barrier, but certainly we were able to understand what he had to say. So that it only came out recently is interesting, but not surprising.
Yes, right there.
Hi, Catherine McDonald, Global News. As many of us know who cover crime on a regular basis, these rewards very rarely get paid out. Why do you think offering a $10 million reward will make any difference in this case?
We have considered this collectively amongst our group of investigators, with our forensic consultants and with the family. We believe that it provides a new initiative, a new opportunity to seek information. It is not as if leads have not poured into my office over the course of the 10 months. And every consideration is given to each of the calls, whether the calls received from a psychic or from someone who might otherwise be thought to be untrustworthy. The time is given, the opportunity is given, but this provides an incentive, and in some ways, the following incentive. Many investigations are successfully concluded as a result of someone in either a criminal organization or someone who has been involved as an offender in the criminal community receives information, is aware of information from colleagues or friends within that community, and until and unless an incentive is provided to that person, either by leniency in a subsequent prosecution or here by the offer of a significant reward, they remain silent and remain committed to that silence within that community. This is the opportunity for those people to come forward. And as they become wealthy, their colleagues who were engaged in this crime become the subjects of a prosecution. So we believe that there is truly an incentive. We do not think that the history of rewards is as perhaps negative as you have portrayed it to be. There are circumstances where rewards have worked, and we believe it may well work here.
We'll take a question at the back and then over here.
Austin Delaney, CTV News. Might understand this big reward is to be divided up into tips that are good, or is it one big reward that goes to the person who has the information?
The reason for the establishment of a panel of, again, independent people, all of whom have had great experience in the criminal justice system, is to assess the value of the reward, or the value of the information, and to ascertain its impact on the apprehension and prosecution of those responsible for these crimes. Therefore, it is a sliding scale, and it's meant to be evaluated in accordance with a protocol that they will establish independently. We will request that they meet, review all of the literature on the administration of similar rewards elsewhere in the world, review simple protocols established by Crime Stoppers. The assessment of the value of information will be a matter for this panel to establish rather than either the team of investigators or the family to establish. But yes, we do think that if the significant information is received, which leads to the, again, prosecution of those responsible, that the $10 million will be paid out.
And we'll go over here, and then Kevin, to you. Please go ahead.
Joe Warmington, Toronto Sun. This is unprecedented today, and there's a lot of things floating around as you speak with Brian. I want to talk about your investigation in terms of, best you can, motive, suspect. You just said these people, so that could perhaps mean more than one. Evidence that your experts found. The best you can address some of that. I know you've already said you can't. Maybe there's some clue. Secondly, are we to understand that the Toronto police do not have the information that you folks have, and you're looking to work with them, or do they have whatever you have?
Well, the first part of your question, Joe, you answered yourself, and that is that we've indicated that consistent with the integrity of any investigation, we appreciate the desire of the media and the public to know more, but clearly that could have the tendency and impact of jeopardizing the investigation. And so we're not providing any fruits of the investigation today, and we've made it clear that we would not. We have full confidence that the Toronto Police Service is investigating this matter. We have seen failings and deficiencies, some of which we have outlined today, because the failings and deficiencies are what has prompted the Sherman family to take this action in trying to, again, have a new initiative which hopefully will spell results.
Do they know what you know?
We have no idea whether they know what we know. They certainly, we have certainly offered them what we know. But I can indicate to you that despite attempts to further the concept of private-public partnership, that has not been embraced in terms of sharing information with us. But we, we certainly are prepared and willing to share any fruits of our investigation with the Toronto Police Service.
Kevin?
Kevin Donovan, Toronto Star. A question and a quick follow-up, just on what Joe said, the palm prints you mentioned. For example, have you passed that on to the Toronto Police?
We did on May 17th at my offices. Both Mike and Tom were with me when that took place, along with photographs and the actual prints.
And so, as a criminal lawyer of some renown in this country, if you were on the other side of this, defending somebody, and information was led by a Crown prosecutor that had come through this public-private partnership, would you not be attacking them?
No. Again, what has to be preserved is the integrity of how the forensic information was gathered, and secondly, the continuity of how that information was then passed. It was done in a manner that was charter compliant, even though as private actors need not follow the constitutional norms, but I can assure you that it was gathered at the scene by a member of the identification group that I've named. I can't tell you today whether it was Mr. Dalrymple, Mr. Benton, or whoever it might have been that gathered those prints. They were preserved in a professional manner, and they were passed to the Toronto Police Service in a professional manner. I'm not suggesting, Kevin, that an experienced defense counsel might not ask the questions in cross-examination, but I think they'd be stymied by the answer. So I think that it was done in a totally professional and appropriate way, and I don't think that there's anything that has been done that could be subject to any aspect of undermining an effective prosecution. Let me further say this, that anything that we would pass to the police, we can assure the police, we can assure the public that the wealth of experience which this investigative team has, that they have ensured that the information and evidence was gathered properly, lawfully, in accordance with best practices. And that after the gathering of that information, the material is preserved in a secure manner that ensured continuity of the exhibits. And all we have done is kept that under supervision until such time as we could pass it to the investigative authorities and to the Toronto Police Service in a manner that, again, ensured the integrity of the continuity of those items.
Just behind Kevin, and then Christy will come to you. Go ahead, please.
Catherine Porter, New York Times. I'm wondering how much money the family has spent so far on this private investigation. And Mr. Greenspan, it was reported earlier on that you were volunteering in this role. Is that true, or are you being paid?
I don't think either question is relevant to this investigation, nor do I believe that the family would be prepared to reveal that information. I know you just seem to say it's somehow it may be of interest to the New York Times. Let me say this. I was retained. I said the words retained. Retain has two meanings. One is authorized to act on behalf of the family with respect to providing information, and the other aspect of retention is to be appropriately compensated for the time that professionals spend in their services. I was retained in both the philosophical manner and the financial manner that I've just outlined, and I was authorized to retain the team of experts who were assembled, and they were all provided with both authorization to do their work in a professional manner and to be financially compensated for their time.
Christie?
Chrissy Roderick from the National Post. Brian, from what you've said, this sounds like it's been mostly a one-way public partnership. And I mean, I think you've said that pretty directly. So I'm curious then how you know, for instance, that they haven't, the Toronto Police haven't finished comparing fingerprints with no one. I mean, how are you getting the information that then leads you to the conclusion that they fucked it up?
That's about as candid as assessment as I've heard for but one I'd expect from you, Christie. Anyway, the last several months, excuse me, over the course of the last several months, at the request of the Sherman family, they have been briefed on a monthly basis and had conversations directly with the two lead investigators from the Toronto Police Service Homicide Squad. During the course of those discussions, the family has asked direct questions and have received, on occasion, some direct answers. The responses have again been responses that one would expect ought not to and don't compromise the integrity of the police investigation. But there has been candid admissions that during a period of 2 or 3 months there had been no further interviews of people, and the candid concession that the task of elimination prints had not yet been concluded. And that's as current as.
Well, I could add to that, Christie, that some of the persons, when you talk elimination prints, of course, clearly we're talking about people we believe or know to have been inside the crime scene. So we were in the crime scene, we would have had our fingerprints eliminated. We know there were other people in the crime scene, such as housekeepers and cleaners. We've spoken to these people, and some of them have not been fingerprinted.
Jackie, and then we'll come over there.
Brian, given that it has been 10 months and given the deficiencies that you're citing today, what confidence do you have at this point that this will be solved by Toronto?
Well, we're trying to light the fire. That's part of the reason that we've gathered today, to both provide the new incentive for members of the public to come forward with information which they might have, and that's the financial reward aspect of today's conference, but also to light the fire under the Toronto Police Service and to try to ensure that those investigative steps which either have not yet been completed, not to have been taken by this time, are completed, and to, again, encourage a two-way street, because we believe that the resources that we can bring to this investigation will be helpful in trying to, again, pursue what we don't question for a moment is the common objective of both the Toronto Police Service and the Sherman family, and that's to find the perpetrators of the crime.
I just want you to mark that. Given your collective experience on homicide cases, given the point that we're at and the complexity of the case, what are the chances at this point that it can be resolved?
We hear all the time. The other day, there was a public announcement by the Toronto Police Service of what many would have called a cold case, leading to an arrest just, I think, after 23 years. It's been said, although this doesn't apply to the families of the victims obviously get concerned about the length of an investigation, but it's been said by police sources that there's no due date on solving a crime, and there's no due date on solving a homicide. It remains active, and we hope that that today's announcement will abbreviate that time frame and accelerate the investigation.
Yeah, let's take one right there, and then John will come back.
Confirm in these top 10, if I'm understanding understanding correctly, this offer of a private-public partnership has been made to Toronto Police. And I'm curious, has it been flat out rejected or has it been ignored? And who has either ignored or rejected it? And those people include Chief Saunders.
This has not moved up the chain of command to the best of our understanding. It has, it's difficult to distinguish in this case between being ignored and being rejected. So that I suspect the characterization of being ignored is tantamount to being rejected. So I think it's, in other words, has it been clearly said, under no circumstances will there be any public-private partnership? That has not affirmatively been said, but it certainly has been ignored.
And how many times has the offer been put out?
It's been an underlying theme at various times, and indeed we've been trying to establish a protocol for supplying other materials and other information, other potential exhibits, I suspect we could call. We've been trying to establish a protocol since mid-May and have not effectively been provided with the manner in which that could be accomplished. In fact, let me simply read from one letter. Excuse me just for a moment, I apologize. Following the discussions of May 15th and a request for specific material that had been canvassed with the members of the Toronto Homicide Squad that day, we received a request for certain information and certain materials which the private team had in its possession. The following day after that request, Tom Klatt, on behalf of the investigative group, wrote to Homicide to indicate that we should develop a protocol for passing that information as soon as possible, and certainly the cooperative basis of the way in which we intended to provide that material to them. On the 19th of May, we were advised that Toronto Homicide retained counsel to develop a manner of communication between the private group and Toronto Homicide. And since that time, we have attempted to develop a protocol for the passing of information between our group and Toronto Homicide. On June 12th, on June 12th, and I'll quote from an email that Tom Klatt sent to Toronto Homicide, further to your email of May 17th, I'm touching base to clarify what role you'll be taking in light of the introduction of counsel in this matter. With respect to the transfer of any of the items you have requested, please advise whether these transfers will take place directly with you or your designate. With respect to continuity, obviously one could assume that if the items go through counsel and become relevant and are considered evidence at some point, then counsel would become a witness in the continuity chain. I'm sure you've thought of this, and we welcome your thoughts. That has remained unanswered.
Yes, right here.
Rosie Mann of the Toronto Star. Is what you're advocating here today, what you're presenting is sort of partnership, not in fact promoting sort of a double-tiered investigative approach when you have a family with very deep pockets that can afford all these experts, these veterans, and these families of most homicide victims can't even do anything about that.
I think just the antithesis is true, and I think that that takes a very one-sided view and approach to what public-private partnerships are about. What private resources do is assist the community by enhancing investigations, by providing the support of those who are fortunate enough to have the resources, not to have a two-tiered system of investigation, but to ensuring that investigations are conducted thoroughly and comprehensively, and freeing the public purse from the burden of the investigation that we contemplate, so that in this year of overtaxed resources within Toronto homicide, we can alleviate part of that burden by providing private forensic assistance. As an example, if a scene were to be vacuumed today and fabric and fiber collected at the scene of a homicide, it would go to the one place in Ontario capable of evaluating the evidentiary significance of that material, namely the Centre of Forensic Science. The likelihood of that center, in its overtaxed and underfunded and overburdened state today, of being able to engage in the very labor-intensive assessment of that material, if it happened in the year, that would probably be optimistic. What the private resource does is it eliminates the need for the Centre of Forensic Science to evaluate that bag of material, because the private resource can send it off to a private lab in the United States, ensuring that the Toronto Police Service are involved in the movement and continuity of that material to an outsourced research lab. So it, again, assists general investigations and promotes private investigations all at the same time. That's just a simple example of how both the public and the private victim is benefited by that partnership.
We'll take one over here, and then we'll just take two more questions. Go ahead, sir.
Ross McLean. Today, Mr. Greenspan, you started off, you gave no evidence towards who killed these two people, and all of our wishes go out to the family. But what you did give evidence to is to a negligent investigation, perhaps, by the Toronto Police. You gave specific examples of things you felt were substandard with your excellent team here who's able to testify to that. Clearly, the family is not going to be putting in a civil motion for a negligent investigation. They don't want the money, they want the truth. And as I understand what you're talking about today is having the police get involved with you. But isn't the problem there that you have a duty to your client? The police do not have a duty to your client. They have a duty to the Attorney General. So they're going a different way than you. How are you going to merge those two together?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but certainly a joint effort heads in the same direction. There is no conflict between the duty to the Sherman family. Our duty to the Sherman family arises out of their desire to seek the perpetrators of this crime. The duty and obligation of the Toronto Police Service is to seek the perpetrators of this crime. It's a common and shared objective, with common and shared, we believe, common and shared means of investigation and attempts to reach a successful conclusion. So I don't see any conflict whatsoever.
Yes, at the back there.
Christy Vizier from CP24. Is there any reason to believe, I know you can't comment on what you found or what they've found so far, but the timing of this announcement, sometimes we announce rewards when we've absolutely found nothing, and other times we announce big rewards like this when we think there could be something on the verge of breaking in a case.
It could be one of the two.
Yeah, right here in the front.
Sir, keeping in mind, Mr. Greenspan, that you've, sorry, Aiden Humphreys National Post, keeping in mind that the police early in the investigation suggested that the killer had access to the home, do you think that their reluctance to share and cooperate could stem in some way from their retained belief or concern of how close your clients may be to this crime scene?
No, we, quite frankly, I think that we approach it from a different perspective, Mr. Humphrey. I think our perspective was that the premature conclusions reached set them off in the wrong direction. We believe we contributed, particularly through Dr. Chasen and the 3 homicide investigators here today. We contributed to the conclusion that they had set off in the wrong direction, and that direction was rerouted as of January 26th of 2018 at the public press conference they held. So I think that's the perspective that we have of what took place.
So you don't think in any way that there's still a suspect pool or lingering suspicion regarding those who have access to the home? On the police department.
They certainly haven't shared that with us.
Okay, we'll take one more. Yes, you've been waiting, sir.
Do you have any examples of where private-public partnerships have resulted in successful prosecution?
I think internationally there have been, Alberta's tried to use some types of partnerships. I will concede that the most successful examples are in commercial fraud areas. That certainly they're the best examples because they bring the expertise of private resources in the world of accounting and banking to the table, where police resources and police expertise don't share that same sort of either educational or experiential background. So certainly the best examples are in the area of commercial crime, but there is no reason that those examples in commercial crime can't be easily moved to the field of forensic examination and homicide investigation. And that's a view shared by the 3 homicide investigators here and the identification officers who, if we add it up, have several hundred years of experience with the Toronto Police Services, or more, right? So that, and then we had my 45 years as a lawyer. So I do you, Ray? No, certainly not in North America. Australia and the UK are the sort of the prime experimental investigatory agencies that have tried to use this effectively.
So that concludes our press conference for today. I want to let you know copies of Brian's statement will be available from my colleague on your way out. Thank you for attending on behalf of the Sherman family and Brian Greenspan and the team of investigators. Thank you very much.